We are Jewish Americans. We believe in a future for this country where everyone is free and safe, no matter what we look like or where we come from.
We are Jewish Americans, as diverse as this country itself.
We are one people, but have many experiences and identities.
Our people have survived genocide and fascism, deportation and slavery.
Resistance and survival are our birthright.
We are rooted in a legacy of pursuing justice, and we are rising up again.
Because the stakes for this election could not be higher.
As we mourn the lives lost in Pittsburgh, Poway, El Paso, and in detention centers, we know who is to blame.
Those who track hate say there is no doubt political rhetoric is in part to blame.
President Trump repeating a comment about Jewish Americans. Any Jewish person who votes Democratic is being, quote, disloyal.
U.S. Representative Steve King retweeting messages from a known Nazi sympathizer. Charlottesville was a turning point. The president's lack of a complete condemnation of what happened was cheered by white nationalists.
By setting the stage for white nationalist violence, Trump and the Republican Party represent the greatest threat to Jews in this country.
When it comes to white supremacists and neo-Nazis marching in the street, there is only one side.
We know, as a Jewish community, our safety is dependent on the safety of all people.
In 2020, Bend the Arc Jewish Action is mobilizing Jews and allies across the country to remove white nationalists from office.
We were made for this moment.
We won't let politicians harm our communities to expand their own wealth and power. We're going to hold those politicians accountable in November.
A more just America is possible, and we will build it together in solidarity.
I'm an American Jew, and I'm rising up for a future in which we are all free and safe.
I'm rising for LGBT equality.
For working class people.
For a thriving planet.
For progress.
We are ready. We rise as one.
Good afternoon, Bend the Arc. It is an honor to be speaking to you from Berkeley, California. I've been a leader in the Bay Area chapter since 2011, first as a Jeremiah Fellow, and then on statewide progressive taxation and criminal justice campaigns. And I can tell you that even here in the progressive hotbed that is the Bay Area, things feel dire. You don't need me to tell you that our country is increasingly overrun by a white nationalist agenda. And this pandemic has revealed more starkly the economic, racial, and class fault lines that undergird our society. I'm a teacher, and daily I feel beaten down by the effects of this on all our children. It's been easy for me to feel like it's time to give up. But then I think about Abraham, Torah's first hero, the humblest and noblest of our prophets. Torah tells us almost nothing of Abraham before God spoke to him, why Abraham would be the one chosen to walk into the unknown. Our rabbis, in a midrash, an interpretive story, give us one answer. They liken Abraham to a traveler, someone who is wandering through the world and comes across a birah doleket, a palace that is burning down. And the traveler sees this palace, this horrific sight, and asks aloud, how can it be that there is no one to take care of this place? Then the owner of that palace speaks to this traveler and says, I am the owner. Abraham, in this midrash, is the traveler. He's wandering through the world and he sees it on fire, famine, oppression, destruction, and he wonders, how can it be that there is no one to take care of this world? How can I take care of this world? And it's in that moment that God calls to Abraham. But the original Midrashic texts uses a very clever turn of phrase, which Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel teaches. The phrase birah doleket, palace on fire, can also mean an illuminated palace, a palace of light. Just imagine the most decked out Christmas house you've ever seen. So when Abraham asks, how can it be that there is no one in the world to take care of this? It's not that he's asking from a place of fear, but he's asking from a place of awe and wonder in the beauty of the world. Abraham sees the potential of creation. So what grounds me in this moment, in this text, in this story, in Abraham, is that he is a model for us. Because what makes him special, what makes him unique, is that he can see both simultaneously. The palace on fire and the palace of light. Oppression and liberation, destruction and creation. The world as it is and the world as it should be. And it's that holding of duality that inspires me. And that is the fundamental bedrock of what I think Jewish organizing is. That is what the last 2 days have shown me again and again, that our multitude has the full vision of the magnitude of the horror and the oppressions and the xenophobia of this moment. But we can also see with full wonder the potential of the society we are in. We see the oppressions entrenched around us. And through organizing together, we can break the chains that hold us back and bring forth our liberation and the liberation of our neighbors. We can sit alone with the pain, and together we can rise in power to create something new. Abraham did this, Moses did this, our American progressive ancestors did this. We can and we must do this. May we find the strength within ourselves and amongst ourselves to see the palace of fire and turn it into a palace of light. It is now my pleasure to introduce Rabbi and poet Mónica Gomery.
Hi, everyone. It's really thrilling to be invited to share some poetry with you all to open this session, and also to share this space with these absolute movement giants who are personal heroes of mine. So it can be hard these days to find the right words. And sometimes poetry can give us access in a different way. I'll read 2 poems to you, and I invite you to close your eyes or take a slow, deep breath, whatever will help you receive. Love was invented for times like these. It's important to say, and without synonym, love's broad shoulders shouldering the days. Love strips our beds, wraps gleaming our faces. Love saturating the hospitals and taking children to the park over and over. We pour love into jars and we drink. We pour love over our heads. We drench ourselves. We don't know what will protect us. Love was invented to offer up something other than fear, something that lays down inside of us, lays a blanket against our most anxious internal organs. Love is smart. Love thinking love's thoughts, calling to tell us over the phone that illness is not love's opposite, that loss isn't love's rival. Love was invented to engine our days, to havoc the nightmares, to splinter sung language and cradle the parts of us hands cannot reach. Love surveying the scene, love taking it in, neighbors dropping off groceries, doctors bending their knees, the chronically ill turned away from the clinic. Love's broad shoulders shaking with grief. Love's bright spine dancing with purpose. And this is After Pulse, in memory of the victims of the Pulse nightclub shooting, Orlando, June 2016. Here is the quietest place, the crease at the fold of the body, that place that you tuck yourself into when you are afraid, when the storms shake the world and the rains come in bullets and there is a roof blocking the sky and the roof makes things less safe, when enclosures imprison, when darkness was freedom and becomes suddenly death. Here is the silence, how it draws you toward it by calling out the names of every one of your wounds, not just the headlines, but each intimate name, named by its shadow, and the names of how many that run where blood was a river, dried over and rising again. We say their names, and we say, and we say, and the litany wrestles our tongues from our mouths. At the vigil, he told us, each of these names is a verse of Quran. Each of the fallen was a sign of God in the world. At the vigil, our hands have grown candles in the place of our fingers, igniting 10 flames of remembrance on each of our bodies, and we lift our hands toward the roof, all flamey and burning, because who decided anyway that this vigil should take place inside? Up go the hands and up climb the flames, and as we are mourning, we are burning it down. We are burning it down. Let's try again once the fire's done eating. Let's build from the heart. Here is cavernous grief. Its walls echo with hollow, its name can't hold on. The grief wants you to think you are alone inside of its sticky, wet walls. No language for loss, no compass for rage, no context for mess. Don't be mess, don't be dizzy, the grief goads and cajoles. Don't be a wrecked ship in the night, racked up against the walls of a fortress, wood splintered apart and passengers missing. Don't be a ship on its way between countries, or a raft filled with children and parents needing somewhere to land. Don't be between borders, don't be for other people. Do not be for one another. The cavernous grief echoes, its voice harsh as it bounces against its own walls. Here is blood. Don't drink it, don't touch it, or look directly at it, even though it is as red as your own, or still redder. Blue on the inside and red on the outside, and glinting with sequins both inside and outside. Blood, is it yours? Is it someone's little brother's? Prying apart lips, blood emerging as names like calligraphied ribbons on satin in red. Say their names, bleed for this, bloodlet the wound of the mouth. And it comes forth as the quiet, because it is grief, beyond words but contains words, because it is candlelight, because it is Kaddish, because it is scripture and speechlessness speaking. Burn it down, says the blood, says the worn sacrament. Put your candle hand into the palm of another's, and another's, and another, and don't fear the fire. It will gather in heat and in force, and you'll be connected. We will all be connected. Let it burn to the ground. And when it is over, the earth will know what to do next. Thank you for listening. I'm very honored to introduce this next segment, which is an interview with two of our biggest progressive champions in Congress, Representatives Levin and Rashida Tlaib, both from Michigan, who spoke on video last week with Ben the Ark's Deputy Washington Director, Arielle Gingold. This is actually just an excerpt of their full conversation, so we hope that you will watch the full extended version after the conference online.
Congresswoman Tlaib, Congressman Levin, thank you so much for as you know, Ben the Ark is having our national conference right now. We were hoping to be all together in DC, but we are so deeply grateful that you made time to figure out the tech and the Wi-Fi bandwidth and, you know, sharing space with your families to join us. First and foremost, this is a really weird time. How are you both doing? How are your families? How are things in your districts?
I know Michigan has been hit pretty hard, but I think all of us know someone that is impacted directly by it. It's not only a death in a family, illness, losing a job, losing their business. A lot of folks are anxious, fearful, so much uncertainty. And so it's been really hard serving in Congress during, a pandemic, and prior to that, so many other kind of challenges our country has been going through.
This is first and foremost a public crisis, and to get out of it, we've got to lead with public health. And the injustices that we're seeing in the public health, ripping open what we knew was always there about all the racial and economic injustice in this country, about the way it's affecting people.
Yeah, I think in Michigan, 40% the folks that have passed on because of COVID were African Americans, even though the total population in Michigan of African Americans is less than 15%. So for much of my district, it's environmental racism. We already have high rates of asthma, respiratory issues because we're completely surrounded by, corporate polluters and others, and, lack of access to healthcare and so forth. Some, again, much of what's happening now is, I think coronavirus is exposing structural racism, environmental racism, in a way that is really horrifying to watch.
So I'm curious, from what you're seeing on the ground in your districts and also from your existing progressive, visionary leadership and the priorities that you came to Congress to fight for, what do you see as the potential for us and for Congress leading us to shift what we think of as normal, to shift what kind of labor and jobs we value, and to try to undo those systemic racism and economic injustice that is not actually new?
I think we can come out of this with massive social change. Let's start with universal health care and Medicare for all. I mean, would we be having all these problems? Rashida, we've had to do backflips in Congress, right? Just to say, everybody who needs to get tested shouldn't have to pay for it. I think people are beginning to realize that we could have a different society in which we made taking care of each other and we made the basic dignity of work for everyone much more central. And we'd have better outcomes in a crisis like this by far.
Yeah, and I want to read, I love this quote by Sonia Renee Taylor. And I want to read that before I talk about, what really needs to happen. But I think it really centers around this moment. But she said, quote, "We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than that we normalized greed and inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature." And I just feel very much about this new garment and what that means. And it's about putting really people first and making our government be about people first. When I have the third poorest congressional district in the country and I see, Michigan get to 1 million people applying for unemployment benefits, much of my neighbors who are considered essential workers not having access to childcare, all of the economic divides and the survivor mode that many of my folks were already in, it's just like 10 times full. It's really showing the importance of us to be able to combat poverty and be able to talk about real, good paying jobs, talking about water as a human right. We've been fighting for access to water in Detroit and throughout, and clean water in Flint and beyond. And what we noticed, as soon as the coronavirus came up, people were asked to wash their hands 10 times. Well, we have thousands. They say 1 out of 20 Americans don't have a shut-off notice. 15 million people are impacted by lack of access to water. And we have alone about 3,000, we think it's more in Detroit alone, that don't have access to water during a global pandemic. And so these are things to me that were not normal before. And I don't want to go back to that. I want to use this as an opportunity to just how broken these systems are right now and why we need to really be intentional about addressing them.
Almost every huge change towards a more just society came out of some crisis. And we are in a crisis that personally, I just have to admit, I could not have imagined. I never thought I'd be serving during a pandemic like this. And so even though we're stuck, isolated physically from each other, it's incumbent on us to have more connection than ever, to come together in every way technology allows us to organize for justice in our world, to put pressure on Congress to do what we need to do, to make sure that on November 3rd, we send a huge message and have a government that is of the people, by the people, for the people, not for, those who have the most dollars. And It's not easy, but I see so many beautiful sparks of people trying to do that. So I feel encouraged,
Amen.
even though the times are so very tough.
You both really just showed what you came to Congress to do, right? And people knew when they elected you that you were bold, progressive organizers who came to Congress to really improve people's lives. And I think one of the things that we three and our teams have learned together this year is just how much we had to work through together. And you two, the work you've had to do supporting each other and within your own communities to fight the forces that are trying to tear us apart. And I think, Rashida, you in particular know better than most just how damaging the right wing is. And, you know, where Andy and I deal with anti-Semitism, you have to deal with anti-Muslim and Arab bigotry and the weaponization of anti-Semitism, the way that the right wing is trying to falsely accuse particularly progressive women of color and leaders like you of anti-Semitism in order to divide us. And I think you both have been a real example of how much we are stronger together in the way that we can support each other. And so I'd love for you both to talk about what that experience has been like for you, what you've learned from each other and about our communities.
You sometimes have to outwork and outlove hate. But for Andy and I, it's organic. It's not, you see sometimes folks kind of doing it. It's more, it's transactional. I think it's real with Andy and I. It's a real friendship that we really do believe in. This new possible world out there. We believe in clean air. We believe that you should love whoever you want. We believe in all of those kinds of, I think, things that really do bring us together, and it's real and it's genuine. And that's how we push back against those that weaponize, I don't care if it's anti-Semitism or whatever. All you do is it through your actions, and through my actions, through my work with so many of my colleagues, not only Andy, you just outwork that form of hate and that form of kind of targeting that continues to happen and will probably continue to happen from the right wing.
So I've been a huge fan of Rashida as an organizer. And then when you come to like this whole question of white supremacy and all the different forms it takes, this is interesting, right? I'm a Jewish boy from burbs representing some of the areas where Jews have lived in recent times, but I represent a lot of Muslims too. I have many mosques in my district. This is America today, and we have a chance to learn about each other, to work together, to love each other across all of these divides in our communities and in our whole world. So we're in a moment of virulent anti-Semitism and rising anti-Semitism in the U.S., in Europe, around the world, and also where other forms of bigotry are on the mark. And I really do think that anybody who is serious about taking on anti-Semitism not let it be cheapened, cannot let really our efforts be undermined by trying to divide us in the way that people have. That's not a real fight against anti-Semitism. That's some other political thing going on. So Rashida's been a huge ally in this. I feel like she's had deep relationships with me and many others in the Jewish community forever. And we're just sort of locking arms from a distance, to fight all forms of hate and bigotry.
One of the guiding principles of Ben the Ark's work for the last several years has been that we are only safe in solidarity. You can't just fight anti-Semitism. You can't just fight anti-Muslim and Arab bigotry. And it's exhausting and maddening and scary work. And it's made less scary. It's made less maddening because of the relationships and partnerships and friendships that we're able to build, and so deeply grateful to be in partnership in this work with you and to get to introduce our base to both of you and to the work that you're doing together, not just for our communities, but for everyone.
During this pandemic, even though we really are like humanly, like physically disconnected, I feel like we're connecting a lot more than we did before. I just hope people don't forget the importance of that. I think that's the way we really are able to combat all the pain of oppression, all the pain that we see happening in the world. And so I think about what he said that when he said that to me, but I think about it, and this pandemic has somehow connected a lot of people that weren't connected before.
That is the most perfect way to end. I know you all have to get back to supporting your districts. It's really good to see you both, and looking forward to being in person again sometime.
Thank you so much to Representatives Tlaib and Levin and our own Arielle Gingold for such a rich and meaningful conversation. We hope you'll check out the extended video of their conversation online after the conference. Hi, my name is David Lubinsky, and I'm a proud board member of Bend the Arc. And now it is my profound honor to introduce Alicia Garza. Alicia Garza founded the Black Futures Lab to make Black communities powerful in politics. In 2018, the Black Futures Lab conducted the largest survey of Black communities in over 150 years. An innovator, strategist, organizer, and cheeseburger enthusiast, Alicia is also the co-creator of, maybe you've heard of it, Black Lives Matter, and the Black Lives Matter Global Network. The Strategy and Partnerships Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and the co-founder of Supermajority. Her forthcoming book, tentatively titled How to Turn a Hashtag into a Movement, will be published in 2020.
Thank you so much for having me here this afternoon, and shout out to David, your glasses are excellent. So when I was a teenager, I saw a quote in a fashion magazine, and the quote said, "There are infinite possibilities for freedom." I'm sure I cut the quote from the magazine and placed it on a vision board at some point. But interestingly enough, even though that quote was in a fashion magazine, it's never left me. There are infinite possibilities for freedom. We are facing some of the sharpest crises that many of us have ever experienced. There's a global pandemic at a time when our public health systems are in severe crisis, alongside an economic crisis that gets worse by the minute, and a crisis in our democracy, where it is more important than ever for our communities to have a say over the decisions that are being made in our name, and we have not yet even adapted our plans to make sure that that can happen. In the meantime, white nationalists are coming back from underground. Where they were once considered to be a fringe element, now they are essentially running this country by running it into the ground. And still, there are infinite possibilities for freedom. These crises are laying bare what so many of us have been pointing to for so long, that the rules are rigged in favor of the powerful, and so we have to change the rules once and for all. Inside of this devastation, we have a choice. We can choose to be resigned. We can say that this is just the way that things are. We can say that our best choice right now in this moment is just to focus on ourselves, focus on our families, and focus on each other. Or we can get mad as hell and we can fight back to take back what has been stolen from us. Make no mistake, being resigned to what is happening right now has never been a choice. It's a death sentence. It's a slap in the face to all of those people whose shoulders we stand on, those people who have endured horrific circumstances, and yet they fought for themselves. They fought for us. They fought to live another day because they knew that each day that we stayed alive was another day that we could fight back, kick ass, and take some names. There has never been a better time to organize than right now. I know you probably hear that a lot, but it's true. So let me say it one more time. There has never been a better time to organize than right now. Inside of that hurt, that grief, that tragedy, there is always the present human desire to survive, to be connected, to make it through, to see better days. And every day in our communities, people are making a way out of no way. And we're able to do so because of the incredible mutual aid that is growing in the gaps where courageous leadership is supposed to be. We are able to do so because of the ways in which we are caring for each other when the country that we have helped to build is not caring for us. We are able to do so because our enemies are revealing themselves to us one by one. Those who would refuse to care for you unless you agree to take away someone else's self-determination. Those who would try to pit you against another person who is also just trying to figure out how to put food on their table. They have been operating in the shadows for decades, but now they are becoming clearer and clearer to us, and that is an opportunity. I don't know about you, but that sounds like the perfect conditions to me for a full-scale takeover. In the face of a lack of leadership, are we courageous enough to lead? In the face of a refusal to govern, are we courageous enough to solve problems not just for ourselves, but for millions of others? In the face of change, which is inevitable, are we ready to direct that change towards a better future and a better right now for you, for me, and for all of us? That is the question. I believe that there are infinite possibilities for freedom. What it means for us to organize in this moment is to push ourselves to govern, not just react to what's left of our government. It will be easy for us to lift up all of the things that we do not like, and we should continue to do that. It will be easy for us to turn on each other under the guise of not doing enough. But to realize those possibilities, those infinite possibilities for freedom, we will need to push ourselves and each other to be the people who are bringing the solutions with deep understandings of the problem under our belts and the stories of our people in our hearts. To organize in this moment means to assume responsibility for governing, for solving problems for millions of people, for leading millions of people to a better today and a better tomorrow. What it means for us to organize in this moment is to never forget that the failure of movements always comes from leaving people behind. At Bend the Arc, you all know the trouble that ensues when Jewish voices are weaponized for someone else's political gain. With the rise of white nationalism, white extremism, and racialized violence, some of us will become targets and others of us will be asked to become allies. And it will not be as clean as we think. Their goal is to turn us away from each other. For freedom to become possible in this moment, we must resist this at every single turn. We must never let each other go because my freedom is bound to yours and your freedom is bound to mine. There are infinite possibilities for freedom. What it means for us to organize in this moment is to provide connection where there is isolation and fear, confusion, and anxiety. In a world that is shifted to online engagement, we cannot underestimate the power of being the first voice someone hears in the morning when they wake up and the last voice that someone hears at night before they go to sleep. Let our movement be like that crush you cannot live without. Let our movement be like the anticipation of your lover's phone call. We can get there if we remember that not every conversation is a political conversation, but every conversation is political. Our job is to reach the people who have not yet joined our community. the people who didn't even know we existed. My wish for us in this moment is to remember that it is easier to find comfort in the people you've been in connection with for years than it is to be vulnerable enough to learn about ourselves through connecting with those who have not yet joined us. To humble ourselves at the task of converting ever more people to being firm and staunch believers that this way of life is no way of living at all. There are infinite possibilities for freedom, and that means we must ready ourselves to meet them at every step. We must also believe that freedom is possible, carrying that conviction with us through the worst of times. To really believe that we can be free is to know that our communities deserve that type of faith as well. To build it, we have to dare to make it real. There are infinite possibilities for freedom. It is possible for us to expand the realm of what is possible in this moment. You and I must work together to invest in our radical imagination while also making our imagination real. Let our imagination put food on tables. Let our imagination place babies back with their mothers. Let our imagination fight their wedges with love and kindness and connection. Let our imagination make our communities powerful again in politics the right way. We must work together to fight back against those who say it cannot be done. We must organize together to create a force that is so powerful that we cannot be stopped. I won't lie to you and tell you that our enemies are on the ropes, because they are not. But I will tell you the truth and say that their way is no way at all, and their way cannot and will not last. My wish for you, my wish for us, my wish for me is that we use this opportunity to fortify ourselves for this fight ahead. Our communities need us. Our country needs us. I need you, and I need us, because there are infinite possibilities for freedom. Thank you.
Wow. Alicia, getting to hear you say, I believe there are infinite possibilities for freedom multiple times, it really, really hit me in my heart. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is just invite all of you to take some deep breaths with me. We are getting the chance now to integrate everything that we've just heard. What we heard were some incredible visions for justice and liberation and transformation that were shared. And that is really stimulating for the mind and for the heart and also for our bodies. And it's worthwhile for us to take the time to really let it in and let it sink in. So I'll invite you to lean back, maybe feel your feet on the floor, or feel the chair or the couch, wherever you're sitting, support you. Just kind of relax. And you can soften your gaze and start to slow and deepen your breath. Breathe in something you heard that inspired you. And if you want to, you can put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And then breathe into those points of contact. Feel that breath all the way down through your feet and your toes, and then all the way up through your shoulders and your neck and the very top of your head. Let it fill you. And as you breathe out, send your breath as an offering into this interconnected web of inspiration and possibility. We are connected through these breaths. and we do this courageous work together. So take one more moment to reconnect to your breath. Send some gratitude out. And we will also get to see this beautiful collaborative art project that was made today by participants of Pursuing Justice. Here it comes. It was created online together over distance. Participants responding to questions about what pursuing justice means to them, facilitated and curated by artist Jessica Valores. So as we continue taking in our breath, integrating this experience and our inspiration, let's also take in this beautiful artwork. And I'm very glad to introduce you all to our next segment. Many of Bend the Arc Jewish Action PAX endorsees were planning to join us in person were we all together, but that wasn't possible. And so they sent their well wishes via video instead. So take a look.
I'm Congresswoman Katie Porter, representing California's 45th District in Orange County. Thank you for inviting me to say a few words about the important work Bend the Arc is doing. I represent one of the most diverse congressional districts in the country, and we benefit from Bend the Arc's leadership in creating community across faiths, across class, across race, and other potential divides. What has always made Bend the Arc special is that you understand there is no substitute for being on the ground, learning about your neighbors, and showing solidarity. My family lost our farm in the 1980s, and I spent years fighting for people who were foreclosed on during the financial crisis. It's moments like these, and the coronavirus is going to be this kind of moment, when people are hurting most, that your empathy and commitment to social justice matter. The things we are experiencing in this country right now are not about being Jewish or not Jewish. They're about right and wrong. Bend the Arc understands that, and I'm proud to be fighting alongside you for what's right.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining Bend the Arc's National Conference. And I hope that you and your families are staying safe and healthy during this virtual get-together. I want to thank all of you who've joined today, all of you who've dedicated so much of your time and so much of your energy and efforts towards pursuing justice. Please stay healthy. Please stay safe during this time. And I just want to say, God bless you all.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to say a few words. We're living in some uncertain times. We don't know when we're going to be together again, and we don't know when exactly we're going to be able to fix the health and economic devastation that this pandemic has caused. I want to commend you all for moving forward with this conference online. You're continuing to fight the good fight, even if it's over Zoom. The work that you're doing, which is holding this administration accountable, fighting for social justice, are more important now than ever. This crisis has really taken a mirror and shined it on the social and economic and health flaws and inequities that we've lived with every day throughout this country. We need to fix them now more than ever. Thank you so much for all you're doing, and I hope you continue to stay safe and stay healthy out there. And thank you for all your help.
Hi, Bend the Arc. This is Representative Kim Schrier coming to you from my home congressional office during the coronavirus pandemic. I wanted to let you know that Congress is working hard, even when we are working from home, working to rescue the country at this really difficult time.
Hi, this is Jason Crow from Colorado. Just wanted to send this special message to all my friends with Bend the Arc. Thank you for your friendship and support over the years, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in the years ahead. This is a really challenging time for our nation and our communities, but I firmly believe that America is always at its best when we focus on our shared values, our common humanity, and we come together to overcome great challenges. And that's the opportunity that is laying before us right now as we address this economic crisis and health crisis that lays before us.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Angie Craig of Minnesota's 2nd Congressional District. It's my honor to join you remotely today. I'd like to start by thanking all of you who are or know a frontline worker. Thank you for your work to help keep us healthy and safe. As COVID-19 has brought changes in our daily lives, it's remarkable to see how many people join together to work toward improving our society. As you do your work today, it seems like we have a lot left to do. But there has always been the struggle in the nation. With people and progress takes struggle, and we go forward and we go backward.
Hey, Pursuing Justice attendees. This is Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton. I just wanted to say hi and thank you for your advocacy and organizing efforts. I know that this year's conference is virtual, but even as we stay apart physically, we can still come together to fight for the values that are important to all of us. So stay motivated, stay inspired, and good luck as you bend the arc towards justice for all of us. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Congressman Chris Pappas from New Hampshire. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. I know this is a deeply troubling time for all of us. The coronavirus pandemic has totally upended life as we know it. But in this period of social distancing and isolation, I believe we have an opportunity to come closer together as a nation. What's clear from this virus is that we are all interconnected, and that what affects one of us affects all of us. I want to thank Bend the Arc for your strong support of the Federal Equality Act. Your advocacy helped us pass it in the House last year, and as one of 7 LGBTQ members of the House, I look forward to continuing the fight to ensure that equal means equal, that everyone can live their truth. Let's continue to stand together in the work ahead of us. I wish you a productive conference. Be well and take care.
Hello, I'm Dove Kent, Senior Strategy Officer at Bend the Arc, and I am thrilled to welcome you now to a panel discussion about building the future we need. During periods of great upheaval, alongside loss, there is opening. There's an opening right now for the right to further entrench their power. There's also the opening for our collective longings to become reality. We have responsibility at this time to build the kind of multiracial movement that we've never seen before, to create a level of demand that stretches our imaginations, to insist that our government be by, for, and of the people, to organize in ways that build our deepest belonging to each other. So I am so honored to introduce our 3 panelists who are taking on these responsibilities, leaders who are transforming the political terrain and creating fundamental shifts in our economy and our democracy. Please welcome Eric Ward, Executive Director of Western State Center and Senior Fellow at Southern Poverty Law Center. Dania Rajendra, Director of Athena, a broad coalition of local and national organizations taking on Amazon and creating an economy where everyone can thrive. And Naomi Klein, award-winning author and journalist, author of On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal, and co-founder of The Leap. Eric and Dania are the smartest people I know, and Naomi is the smartest person I don't know. So this is going to be a fantastic panel. Let's dive right in. I was recently reminded that the word crisis comes from the ancient Greek word that means turning point, and it derives from the verb which means to decide. What decisions is American society being forced to make at this moment? And what are the implications of those choices? Naomi, can you begin?
Well, I'm thrilled to be with all of you and want to thank Bend the Arc for your expansive definition of justice and for all the alliances that you're building. And I'm thrilled to be in conversation with such wonderful people. So it is absolutely true that moments of crisis are malleable. And I think, Arundhati Roy has given us the best framework for thinking about the moment we're in, as far as I'm concerned, which is the idea that the pandemic is a portal. And I think that's important because there is this idea that we are going to return to somewhere that we were before we were so rudely interrupted. And the fact is that we are in a period of very, very rapid change. Social change, economic change, political change. We are going somewhere different. We have to understand that. And in terms of the stakes of this moment, they just couldn't be larger, because we will either go somewhere that is much worse, or we will go somewhere that is a lot better. And if we want it to be better, then we're going to have to fight for it. I think you know, I have been writing about these moments, these volatile moments of shock for a long time. And the writing that I did 15 years ago when I wrote The Shock Doctrine was all about how in these moments we very frequently get knocked back because the forces that we are up against, the corporate forces and the right-wing political forces, are pretty bloody-minded in these periods when we are focused on the emergencies that the shocks, that the crises present to us. Right? We are more focused on our daily needs, our emergency needs, by definition, and it's in those moments that New Orleans school system was turned into a privatized experiment in charter schools after Hurricane Katrina. And speaking of Hurricane Maria, we saw the same pattern repeat with hundreds of schools being closed and so on. So there, I could go on and on about all the dystopian potentials for this moment, but I think what's really giving me hope is that I think we're on to them. I think we are keeping our wits about us in this moment of crisis. I think we aren't just resisting the predatory attempts to exploit the crisis, but we are also advancing transformative goals as movements. And as Alicia said, this is a moment of tremendous potential, in large part because we are seeing how quickly societies can change in the face of threat. We are seeing consumer capitalism transform virtually overnight. And so if that is possible, and we have all been told for our entire lives, those of us who are 50 and under, that there is no alternative to neoliberal capitalism. And yet we are seeing decisions being made to put human health above the howls for profit. And this is going to be a fight, and it's an ongoing fight. But now that we have seen our societies change so quickly, we can imagine continuing that change in other ways. We can imagine choosing to take our cities back from cars and our skies back from planes, using flight more sparingly for the flights that we really need, and putting the needs of the climate first, and the habitability of the planet. And that's just one example of the way in which we can be deliberate in the way we design our response. At the LEAP, which is a climate justice organization I co-founded, we talk about a 3-stage process of relief, which is what we need right now, a people's bailout, and a recovery phase, but also a reimagining phase. But we need the seeds of that reimagining phase in the relief and recovery phase. And that's what we really need to be defining.
That's great. I'll jump in. So this is Eric Ward. Hello, everyone. It's a great question. And, I would just say one of the really salient points in this moment is I think we have come to understand that we are in a turning point right now in our society and also in our world, that we are in a moment of great economic inequality, where identity and meaning mean something. But we are also at a point where capital once again has become afraid of, in short, the masses of people, and see people organizing and strengthening their rights as a threat. And I think the point right now of contest is kind of with the middle of society, not the capitalists, but in some ways, right, the liberalism of society that has not yet decided whether their future lies with the masses or with capital. And if they choose capital, as been the trend of recent, it sets the stage for fascism, right? Which is, in short, competition against people movements. It's a way of tapping into people's anger without providing for people's needs. And so we find ourselves in a really critical moment right now. And the left has to figure out how it is going to contest on the terrain of economy, on the terrain of identity and meaning, and what the future should look like if the future we live in right now is coming to an end.
One of the great things about working on Amazon is that exact contest that Eric's talking about. For so long, somewhere between Naomi's 50 years and maybe the last 5, like tech CEOs and their senior management have held captive our idea of what the future might be. And in this moment, we're having a cracking open of who gets to define what our future will be. And at least from where I sit, I'm just overwhelmed by how amazing it is about how many people are taking a look around at how undeniable it is that there are more of us, as Eric says, we're the mass, right? And that we have one another. We want to be with one another. And at Athena, we are experiencing an inrush of workers, for sure, courageous and incredible workers whose leadership stands in stark contrast to what we're seeing from corporate executives. But we're also seeing an inrush of people who are like, I'm with them. And I think that's what we need, both to meet the immediate moment and to protect people in the face of preventable exposure and illness, and what we need to fight for a society where everyone can thrive.
Amen. Amen. I actually would love to build off that. We know that we need to build a bigger we, to lay the groundwork for rebuilding a society in which everyone can thrive. So I'd love to hear if there are specific experiences or stories that are giving y'all hope right now that a bigger we is in fact emerging. Dania, do you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Great.
So if you've been in Bend the Arc Zoom conference all day long, you might not have seen the news that rocked my corner of the world. I saw it on Naomi's Twitter stream, so thanks, Naomi. A senior executive at Amazon Web Services, which is the cash cow of Amazon.com. We know them as the delivery, the marketplace, but what makes them the money is the web services. It undergirds a huge chunk of the online economy. You'd have to give up Netflix and Zoom and Slack to get off. So that's why we talk about them as a monopoly. Anyway, this guy, Tim Bray, quit in protest at the way in which Amazon has been treating not only his white-collar subordinates who work in the Seattle headquarters, but also Mohammed Bashir, who's a member of Athena organization, the Alwood Center in Minneapolis, and Chris Smalls, who belongs to New York Communities for Change and Make the Road New York here in New York. And he pointed out what I think is really obvious, which is the leadership we're seeing from Amazon workers and workers just like them across the economy, people who are really essential to making sure we have what we need, are no coincidence. They're people of color, they're Black, they're Muslim, they're immigrants, and they're women.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a very exciting story. I played some small role in that story because I was invited by a group of Amazon tech workers to speak at, in a video chat, a video call that they had organized where they were building alliances with warehouse workers, right? So this is like, these are white collar workers in Seattle, earning a lot of money, that had originally gotten organized around climate justice. And I had done work with them around that, but then had decided that they wanted to do deeper organizing within their own company and make connections with warehouse workers. And so as warehouse workers have been organizing, and Athena's played a huge role in that, they have been deepening those alliances and decided to have a call for tech workers where they could hear directly from Amazon warehouse workers about what was going on in the warehouses. And they invited me to speak in that webinar about why tech workers should care about warehouse workers. And within hours of them posting about that video call, the two key organizers from Amazon Workers for Climate Justice were fired. Others received warnings, but they didn't miss a beat, had the conversation anyway. And one of the things that we talked about in that conversation was, well, it's not, yes, we need people who are on Amazon's payroll to find those alliances, but what about the people who use the service? What about authors like me who we sell our books on the service, right? What about people who make content for Amazon production? So, I mean, I think this is the challenge that Eric put out there, I think so succinctly, that I couldn't agree more that we are in a fight for the middle. And it's what I think about all the time. And I have to say, I think about it very much as somebody who was, neck deep in the Sanders campaign, right? And I really do feel like so many of the people who were the staunchest supporters of Bernie Sanders. I'm sorry to politicize this, but I just gotta, like, if you look at who were the people who donated most to the Sanders campaign, Amazon workers, Target workers, Walmart workers, right? The strongest supporters of that campaign were working class people, including nurses, National Nurses United, biggest supporter of Sanders over the years, teachers. And I think there was honestly, a real failure of liberals to take leadership from working class people. And I think that is part of the reason why we find ourselves in a much tougher situation than we should be right now, because we're trying to figure out, how do we do these big things that we need to do? But let's be honest, we have a candidate in the Democratic Party who didn't run on that, right? And doesn't have that track record. We'd be in a much better situation if we had chosen one of the candidates who ran on that, right? And so I think we have to be honest that as progressives, who supported Warren, who supported Sanders, we did something wrong because we didn't come together, right? And I think we have to ask ourselves why. And I think, and I think we have to have these hard conversations, because the people who we are all lauding now as essential workers, right, who are being treated as disposable, they knew who they trusted. Okay, but we didn't trust them as liberals, as middle class, upper middle class liberals. We thought we knew better in too many cases. And I know it is complicated, but we are in a tough spot. We are in a tougher spot than we should be, given how quickly public opinion is moving towards policies like Medicare for all, towards taking on mass incarceration, towards standing with migrants. Like we are in a much better place socially than we are politically. Why? Right? And so I don't know, I want to throw that out a little bit. I know it's a bit provocative, but frankly, it's all I think about.
That's right.
Thanks, Naomi.
Yeah, I agree. Well said, Naomi. Well said, Dania.
All right, so I have some more questions that I would love to ask. And then also, we are going to open up the chat. If folks want to put in questions, we will be able to feed some of those questions in, and we'll be able to ask these brilliant folks to answer. So please put your questions in the chat. And the next question that I have is, I love what you were just saying, Naomi, about what are the challenges that we have to face actually in ourselves and in our movements to make possible what needs to happen. And, in this moment of monumental shifts, I would love to know from each of you, what are you learning in this moment that you think can help us all towards the transformation we need? And Eric, I'd love to call on you.
That my son will not get out of pajamas ever.
That's what I'm learning in this moment. That's I don't know if folks can hear me. They're probably listening around the country, but you can probably hear music bumping behind me. Those are my neighbors. They're going really loud. I can't wait to be on my porch and shake my butt in a little bit. But I think it's important to think about what I'm learning. The first thing that I'm learning is that people are adaptable, right? And that people still have needs and desires, and they know what that is, regardless of the intensity of the crises that are happening around us. And I think we really do have to get to a place where our role wasn't to lead movements, it was to support people, right? And I think that lesson is very valuable today, right? Starting the question, right, not about how we're leading, but how are we supporting people and movements in this way. The second is to embrace chaos and complication and hypocrisy, right, and contradiction. These aren't bad things. This is the way that movements get stronger, by acknowledging our own contradictions, our own our lack of certainty around issues. We spend too much time looking for purity, and I feel like purity has separated us from actual people who are actually complicated, right, and contradictory. And it makes us appear aloof at a time where we need to be integrated in communities. The third, I'll just say quickly, just watching the clock, and it's a lesson about people's pain. And I know this was one of the questions out there. There's a story about a woman who went to a doctor like 3 times, and all 3 times that she went, she thought something was wrong with her arm, and the doctor told her there was nothing wrong with her arm, and eventually to stop coming. Well, in the meantime, on her way home, she was stopping at the butcher's house every day, at the butcher shop, on her way back from the doctor, saying something was wrong with her arm, but the doctor said there was nothing and she didn't know. So on that final time, when she stopped at the butcher said, "Oh, that's too bad, the doctor won't help you. But look, I've been studying surgery, and if the doctor's not willing to operate on your arm, I'm willing to give it a shot," right? And the question is so what does she do when she thinks something is wrong? Does she listen to the doctor who keeps telling her something is wrong, or does she trust the butcher? And we're in a place right now where people have decided to trust the butcher. It doesn't mean something is really wrong with that woman's arm, but we have to understand that it no longer matters whether a person is having real pain, right, or they believe they are experiencing pain. They're going to respond in the same way. We live in a society right now that is quickly changing. And the last lesson is that our progressive and left spaces have to get to a point where we understand the importance of showing stability, right, and things that are constant. We have been too chaotic, and it's time for us to settle down, right, and to remember that our job is to support people in their struggle for humanity. And so I think those are 3 lessons that really come to mind to me right now.
Beautiful. Thanks, Eric. Dania or Naomi, would love to hear from you.
Well, Dov, you know that I'm a big history geek. And so it will come as no surprise that I'm reading a lot about moments of economic and social transition. And I think, both as a Jew and as a person of Indian descent, that I'm thinking a lot about kind of the political, economic reality of colonialism, and especially in South Asia. I'm thinking a lot about kind of what led in to the economic construction of the Holocaust and the Hitler miracle. I'm thinking a lot about the Spanish Civil War. But I also think, thinking a lot about the Great Depression. But I also think it's really important to think about the ways in which we are like and not like those moments. Our societies are like and not like those times. And at Athena, our tagline is delivering democracy. And that's in part because we think there's no meaningful political democracy without economic democracy. and that these histories, the ones I'm talking about, the ones I haven't talked about, but I think are equally important, like they determine who can work from home and who has to continue to brave mass transit and public exposure, whose air is clean and whose air is full of particulate matter, whose families have a whole house to spread out in, and whose families are packed in like sardines. And so I'm finding a lot of insight in connecting with what's come before us, and in the courage and resistance of our foremothers and forefathers and previous parents who may have no gender. And also that we do have a bunch of solutions, as Naomi was alluding to. Like at Athena member, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, we talk about a caring economy and what it means to put real resources and public investment into the work of caring for one another as children, as elders in school, but also our planet and our cities, and how that's a stark contrast with the political choices that allow someone like Jeff Bezos, who incidentally is $24 billion richer this month than he was at the beginning of the year. And that too is a political choice. And so trying to think about like the ways in which these feel like times similar to the 1920s or the 1820s, and ways it's not.
Thank you, Dania.
You know, I think it's a huge difference that we that, just as Dania said, that we have a vision, that we aren't just in opposition to these sort of predatory disaster capitalist policies, but we have a vision of the world that we want, and so many of our movements have been doing that that dreaming work, right? That bold visioning process. And so we are ready in this moment when people are suddenly appreciating care work, and which we should have been doing all along, to talk about what a caring economy would look like. And there are a lot of examples like that. All of the work that went into visioning the Green New Deal, that is the economic stimulus program that we need, and we are ready to go. We need the political power to win it. The other thing that's giving me the most hope right now is that we really are living inside a prototype of what Silicon Valley has been trying to push through and not been able to. This prototype of a kind of the app-driven, isolated, streaming economy. And we don't like it. We miss each other. We miss the natural world. And so I think if we can hold on to these lessons, and here I'm speaking for the privilege to have had the privilege of isolation, if we can hold on to the appreciation for care work, our longing for each other, the fact that we take solace in nature, I think those are the building blocks for the world that we need.
Beautiful, thank you. So we've gotten some fantastic questions from folks who are joining us, which is not surprising. And there's been a few different questions that are kind of all surrounding this core curiosity about, what does it mean that we have failed to speak to people's pain? And what do we actually need to do differently to make those connections and build a multi-class, multiracial movement? How can we turn appreciation for essential workers into actual political commitments for change? And I know that you all come at this work from different directions. So I would love to hear what some of your thinking is about how we actually, as a progressive movement, stop ignoring the red states, writing off everyone who hasn't agreed with us, writing off, Trump voters without asking them, where does it hurt? So can you speak to where you come at those connections?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's important to understand that, in the last 40 years, and maybe, I should ask older folks, because maybe the left has always been this pessimistic, and but it's a pessimism now that I feel like borders on nihilism, right? The fact of the matter is that in the 19th century, in the 20th century, progressive and left movements have transformed this world in significant ways, right? It is in the 19th century that workers struggled and brought together things like access to healthcare, right? Work hour weeks, unions, you name it, right? They challenged feudalism. They challenged the idea of absolute royal authority in really significant ways. And in the last century, we fought for the idea that regardless of someone's race or religion or gender, right, that they had the same rights under the law. And those may not seem like big deals, but I liken that to the fact like the train doesn't seem like a big deal nowadays. But I can tell you when the train was invented, it was a really big deal. And people traveled hundreds of miles to watch that train pass. I think we do ourselves a disservice by ignoring how far we have come and what we have accomplished. It makes us look weak. It makes us look more scattered than we actually are. And so the first thing that I could tell folks to do is just start acknowledging the wins. Who wants to join movements that actually don't win anything, right? And so I just think we have to get away from that. The second thing we have to do is we have to understand, I believe, that we are in a moment right now where we don't get to control who sits at the coalition table for those who want to defend the gains of the Enlightenment period, right? And that is about where we are in society. Those are the forces that face us, right? These are forces who are not looking to take us back to the 1800s, but to the 1400s. And it's time for us to understand that we need to bound together with most folks who don't want to go back to the 1400s. Those folks are on our side. It doesn't mean that we are going to agree on everything, but all of us agree that the house should not burn down to the ground. And so I think that piece is really critical. The third is let's settle down a little bit, right? Let's remember, right? We are all on the same side. We spend way too much time policing each other's organizations and each other as leaders, right? Then the fact that 90% of the folks in the world don't belong to our organizations or movements here or outside of this country. And so we need to put our eyes back on the prize. It's risky. It's dangerous to be externally focused, but it's time for us to be externally focused. Let's start with one thing. Let's fight for a guaranteed salary in the United States. Let's fight for equal access to health care. Let's fight for basically a frontline workers' bill of rights that guarantees their children free tuition, free housing. Let's just pick one thing that betters life for everyday people, and let's all pile in, and then let's see if we really get along. Let's see if we are really as divided as we think we are.
Beautiful. Dania, Naomi?
I mean, I think that's really good advice. I would just, coming back to what we were talking about earlier about this news from today about this Amazon VP stepping down, right? That incident really has a lot to teach us, right? About these Amazon tech workers had been kind of a thorn in Jeff Bezos' side for the better part of a year. They had been embarrassing the company, talking about how it wasn't walking the walk on its emissions reductions. They had even they had thousands of workers sign a petition. They testified at Amazon's AGM. But they weren't fired. They were fired when they built alliances with warehouse workers. And it wasn't just warehouse workers in the States. It was warehouse workers in Europe too. And I think there's a key there. It's very threatening when you have middle class and working class in conversation, and you have American workers hearing, what did they win in France? What you actually got the protections that we didn't get, right? There's some hints in there, I mean, obviously we could point to any workplace, any industry, but I think it's just the lesson that we need to learn over and over again, which is we've got to get out of our silos, And we have to find ways to speak that are not personal and accusatory, that recognize that we are in NGO industrial complexes that are keeping us apart, that are structurally keeping us apart, and that make it much harder to collaborate than it should be, because we're often competing over scarce resources. And I think that often that feels like a personal attack when it's actually a structural analysis.
I would say that I obviously totally agree. Someone who's been helping to build this kind of solidarity we're talking about, I think that there's something about what happened in France that's really important for Americans to understand. In France, Amazon said the same mess that it's saying here, right? Oh, we're doing everything we can to take care of workers. We're only shipping essential items. And in France, the people who work in the facilities in France were like, this is not true. In the United States, workers are also saying, this is not true. And I think anyone who's seen Mario Crippen from Romulus, Michigan on late night TV talking about dildos, and if you haven't, you should, right? Like, no, when someone says, like, this is really not what's happening where I live or where I work, it rings true. But in France, the court did something about it, and that's power. That's why we can't give up on fighting for government power. We need all of us. We need all of us to say, well, if Amazon's so essential, or Instacart, or any of these other big corporations, if this is so essential, if broadband is so essential, we can't trust it to monopolies like the ones that are probably delaying my audio right now, right? We can't trust, like, we have a regulatory framework, which is not really how most people talk, but we have a regulatory framework for things that are essential to our society, and we're going to impose that framework on the ways in which corporations like this function. And like, it is possible. And I think that, like, balancing between what happened in the United States and what happened in France, like, we're all encouraging one another to both speak truth to power and find ways to insist that power be held to account. And that's why it's so important that these congressional leaders are insisting that Jeff Bezos come testify personally once, DC is up and running.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We are just about at the close here. And in this last 30 seconds, I just want to ask you if there's any word that you would say about how or what you are looking forward to in that transformative governance that you're speaking of, Dania.
Oh, it's going to be so fun. We're going to have such a good time in a society where everyone can thrive.
We're here. You're here.
Well, I would just say we need a Green New Deal. This is not the only crisis we face, and we need we are not starting from scratch. There's so much work that has gone in to beginning to really map a vision that is about caring for the earth and for each other, right? And it doesn't ask people to choose between a good job and a safe future. And we need to believe in it. We need to fight for it. We need to get out of our silos. And we have to understand that we are up against forces that are preying on our panic, on our fears, are going to try to tell us that we can't be safe without giving up our freedoms, without giving up our privacy, without succumbing to an endless life of screens without people. And it's a lie. It's a lie. If you look at the countries that are doing the best in this global crisis, it's not because they have submitted to surveillance capitalism and apps that track everybody's movements. It's because they've invested in people. It's because they have functioning healthcare systems. It's because they have people who are checking in on people who have come in contact with the virus and then saying, okay, if you need to quarantine, here's a place to stay. I'll help you take care of your kids. We'll make sure you have food. And we can't let Silicon Valley erase the people and the care work from the stories of these success, because they are trying and they have a lot of power in getting those stories out that are honestly not true.
Right.
Amen.
I would just say really quickly, look, I think it's really critically important for us to understand as we move forward, three things. So one is we have to bring much more governance than chaos to our rhetoric and our organizing. It has to look like we actually have the answers we do have, right? In this moment. I think the second is, look, we have to remember that we are in this moment. Again, it may be unique to the United States, but it's not unique to the world per se. And we are in this moment again because technological changes and people's movements have advanced humanity in such a way, right, that it has made the ruling class nervous in this moment, right? And it means the third thing, which is we have to keep telling our stories and we have to start saying the names of the dead that are piling up around us. We do ourselves a disservice by pretending that 3,000 Americans are not dying every day by COVID. And we do humanity a disservice by not naming them, not talking about the sick among us, by pretending this is a private matter when this is a global struggle around whether we are going to be the last surviving humans or not. It's time for us to step up. It's time for us to speak up with love. It's time for us to turn externally and stop our internal organizing with one another. It's time to talk to real people.
Amen. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Dania. Thank you, Naomi. And leaving this conversation with grief and joy and hope and commitment. And may all of us be in that world that you are wishing for, Dania, thriving together.
You're here.
Thank you to the three of you. We are so grateful for the work that you've done to build our movements and the work that you continue to do. And may we be all one step closer to building the world as it should be.
Thank you
And
so much.
now to close our time together, I'm going to turn it back over to Stosh Cotler, CEO of Bend the Arc.
Thank you so much, Dove, and thank you to our brilliant panelists. This is an incredible honor to follow Dove, Eric, Dania, Naomi, Monica, Alicia, Arielle, Representatives Tlaib and Levin, and all the other members of Congress who joined us. It is tremendous to be able to do this work together, and with all of you who've been with us for these last couple of days at Pursuing Justice. And I'm already getting FOMO, or I don't even know what it's called, FOMO for what we're not going to have Pursuing Justice in just a few minutes. We're beginning to make our way towards the close. And I am just thinking back to when we planned Pursuing Justice 2016. And we at Bend the Arc were wanting to create a conference that was like no other. I mean, in many ways, at Bend the Arc, we're trying to build an organization that is not like any other Jewish organization that we have seen. And we wanted to have that would be inclusive and vibrant and fun and political and spiritual and all the things that we hadn't, many of us, experienced at other conferences, not at many Jewish conferences in particular, I say with a lot of love. And we wondered when we had to make this pivot to doing this beautifully planned Pursuing Justice 2020, if we were looking to do it virtually, whether we'd be able to capture any of the magic. And I just don't know how you're feeling, but I feel like this last couple of days have been a balm to my soul. I feel like it has been the most potent spiritual and political medicine, and I am feeling deeply grateful, and I hope that you are too. So I would like to share a story, and it's a story that comes from our tradition, and it is starring a person named Choni. And Choni was out for a walk on a spring day like today, and Choni ran into an elderly neighbor who was planting a tree. And Choni thought to themselves, well, that's odd that this elderly person is planting a tree. And so Choni asked the neighbor, what kind of tree are you planting? And the neighbor said to Choni that he was planting a carob sapling, and that carob didn't bear fruit for another 70 years. So this was not for himself, he explained. It was for future generations to come. And in the story, Choni then falls asleep and wakes up 70 years later. And let's just be honest, who wouldn't want a 70-year nap right about now? I would say that that would feel pretty damn good. But Choni wakes up, and when Choni wakes up, they see the neighbor's grandchildren harvesting the fruit from the carob tree. So, friends, I know we're in a moment in time when it can feel almost impossible to imagine 70 days from right now, let alone 70 years. But I would love for us to take a pause and just imagine together that we've fallen asleep a beautiful, restorative 70-year nap, and we wake up together. And what is it that we see? What are the fruits that have grown from the seeds that we've planted? What kind of ancestors will we be? Over the past 2 days, we have heard incredible stories about intractable injustices and brilliant and creative organizing that's happening all across the country. And one of the threads that connects everything is power. Who has power? Who does not? Who is abusing power? Who is building power for social transformation that will ultimately lead to all of us being able to live lives with dignity, safety, and belonging. And that's why we're here together. We don't get to choose the historic moment that we're in, but we do choose how we respond. And we could be saying to ourselves that we've been living a historic moment that is not easy. And we could say to ourselves that there's not really a point in planting a tree that's going to grow fruit that we may or may not see in our lifetime. But that's not who we are. We are a people who hold fast to the tree of life. We are a people rooted in justice. And in this moment, we are choosing strategic action, and we are choosing life. So our organization's name is Bend the Arc. And our name comes from a sermon that was written by a 19th century Unitarian minister named Theodore Parker. And Parker wrote, "I do understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eyes reach, but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine by its conscience. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice." So Parker was an abolitionist, and he was writing about the belief that one day it would become so very apparent to his country that no human being should ever be a slave. And though his words would become later, he did not live to see them spoken by Abraham Lincoln or made famous by Dr. King. And he would not see the end to chattel slavery or the many, many steps of progress that have been made along the way, as well as the equally long and continual experience of racial terror that has resulted in this country because of slavery and genocide. So the arc, in fact, is a long one. And yet right now, I don't know about you, but I'm not satisfied to wait. And as we have heard, there are infinite ways for freedom. And I believe that that freedom is now and can come now. And I don't think that I'm alone in believing that this is the time. So it has just been an honor and a privilege to be with so many others who share this conviction that this is our moment to organize smarter than we've ever organized before, and to make sure that we are moving in the direction that is creating more freedom and possibilities. So we're asking you to take action. So if you can text this number, either in the text, just type give, and that will help you, if you're able, to make a gift to Bend the Arc Jewish Action so that we can continue to power our movement. You can text COVID to that same number, and that will help send a message to your members of Congress to demand a moral COVID relief package that meets the scale of this crisis. Or you can text organize to join a Bend the Arc city or town. And if there isn't one already there, then our staff will help you build one if you just give us a call or a text. So, coming to a close, we call this conference Pursuing Justice, and that's because we all know that justice, it doesn't just happen. Justice isn't passively coming to us. Justice isn't coming to the United States on its own accord. We have to pursue it. We have to go get it. We have to cultivate it. Let's get to it. And we know that this has been a grueling 4 years since the start of the Trump era. And for many of us, 4 years ago was not the start of the pain. It was merely a point when more people began to take notice. So we do also know that no matter what happens on November 3rd, we will need to draw on every bit of physical stamina, mental fortitude, collective sustainability practice that we have in order to move our agenda forward and to govern. I hope we've learned new skills and built deep, beautiful relationships that will help us dig deep for the resiliency and strength no matter what future we face after November. History has shown us that pandemics like COVID and other major crises create the space for foundational change. Let us face this moment together, shoulder to shoulder, fingers intertwined, no gaps between us. The opening is here. We will rise and move toward it as one. Thank you so very much. Sending you so much strength, so much love, and onward.
All the leaves have fallen down, have fallen down. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Dig deep my roots and return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Dig deep my roots and return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Dig deep my roots and return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind. Dig deep my roots and return again. I am the water, earth, fire, and wind.